Buongiorno, basketball lovers, hoop heads, and heroes of the hardwood. Welcome to another Talkin Ball podcast and making his way to the mic. From Melbourne High School and Slippery Rock University, Pennsylvania, to now a has-been Masters basketball and on Monday nights, powerhouse at MSAC. He's a Virgo who played 265 games with Geelong, South Melbourne and the South East Melbourne Magic. 1991 NBL Most Improved Player. 1994 led the league in free throw percentage at 91.1, I believe. And a two-time NBL champion in 92 and 1996 with the Magic. A professional career that started at 15 with Knox in the then CBA, culminated in 99 with the great Bendigo Braves. Ladies and gentlemen, someone who once scored 107 points in a game with 31 threes. It's the toaster, Saint Andrew Parkinson. Welcome to
Wow. TB, what a great intro. Thanks for that, mate. That's the best intro I've had in a while.
Did I miss anything?
Oh, you could have thrown in the 50-point game against the team that sacked me 9 months earlier. You could have thrown that one in, mate. I missed out on the 92 Olympic team. I guess that one, I'm glad you left that one out because I never had a chance anyway, mate, with Leroy Loggins and Andrew Gaze in my spot. But no, that was pretty good, mate. 92, I was an all-star. I made the all-star team, the South team. But no, can't complain with that intro.
Were you ever in the three-point shootouts back in the day?
I was. I conveniently left that out because I came second to Scott Fisher in the 91 All-Star game. But I have a story. I've always got a story, TB. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a story about that three-point shootout. Scott Fisher actually was shooting twos. He was sneaking over the line a little bit. And it wasn't until the following year that they brought in a referee to make sure that in a three-point shootout that the guys were actually shooting behind the three-point line. So as you can tell, it's 34 years ago, and it still hurts me, mate, to not have that three-point title. But Scott Fisher won it unfairly and squarely.
One of the first great number 30s in the league, Scott Fisher.
Yes.
Funny, because you actually jumped over my original first question, which was going to be the 49-point game, which you apparently robbed of a 50-piece. But it's not the only time you've been robbed because you scored 107. Now, I'm going to read a quote that I got from one of your teammates because that was in a Masters game. Is that correct?
That's right.
Where was that one played?
2019. It was a balmy Thursday afternoon in Cairns in May of 2019.
So the toaster was already warm. Here's a quote from one of your teammates, Cam Rigby. It was epic. Parky did the team thing and allowed others to start. He came off the bench with a spark, capital S-P-A-R-K. He got it going to the point where no one else shot in the second half. Rigby said, I've never seen Anstey, Wertho, or myself hit the offensive glass harder. His actual score was likely higher, though, because the score sheet had Lucas down for 3 points in the second half, which is impossible because A, Lucas didn't shoot in the second half, and B, it's Luke. He can't effing shoot. I've cleaned up the language.
Yes.
So you reckon you might have had 110, maybe?
Well, we think even more because Anstey was credited with a 3 in the score sheet in the second half as well. We did a bit of a forensic look at the score sheet. So we're saying I could have had 113. but no, look, I'm happy with 107. And as Big Rig said, without him and Wertho and Anstey, and I think Matty Burston was in there helping out with a few rebounds as well. No, the boys were definitely looking after me.
Mm-hmm. And, I guess that leads into, we're here to talk ball first and foremost. We're going to initially start with what's happening over the next couple of days with the NBL semi-finals, coming into some game threes, and then we'll talk a little bit about your journey in perhaps part two or a little bit later in the pod. Starting with that scoring from yourself, but also Chris Goulding in this past week. We saw him drop 41 at home against Perth. He started out pretty hot with 11 in the first quarter in game two before he cooled off a little bit. Can you just, then Matt hurt yesterday in the South East game, can you talk a little bit about what it's like or explain what it's like as a shooter/scorer when you're in the zone like that?
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful thing. And the great thing is you feed off the energy from, your teammates, from the crowd, from your coach, just from little things like that. And once you're in that zone, I guess, if you want to call it that, it's just a matter of you just want to get the ball and get it up. And that's basically all you're thinking of doing, is just getting the ball and getting it up. And the good thing is, and this is what happened with the Phoenix teammates, with Matt Hurt yesterday, and also with CG43 on last Thursday, was the teammates are just going out of their way to get him the ball. And it's just such a great feeling when you've got, I guess, in some ways, the whole stadium, the whole stadium's behind you, and you can sort of, you just sense it. You can just sense, and you can hear the sort of sounds in the crowd when you get the ball and you release it. And then, of course, when it goes in, there's just that huge roar and that adrenaline rush that you get through your body. So that feeling is, it's like a drug.
It's the adrenaline. Yeah,
it is. Well, adrenaline is a drug. So you're right, and it just goes through your whole body, and you feel like you're walking on air. You're on clouds, and it's just a matter of getting the ball up, and particularly with CG43 the other night. I had the pleasure. Well, I saw you at the game, actually, TV, but I had the pleasure of sitting right behind the United bench, and when he got that third foul, I think, what was it, 3 or 4 minutes before the half? Yeah, he came storming off, and it wasn't, look, he was, he wasn't happy. He was a few profanities. It was a pretty soft call, I thought, on that third, and that's what he was expressing, I guess, to anyone in that area. He was letting us know that it was a pretty soft call. But for him to gather himself after that half, look, he hit his first 3 that game. He had 11 points up until that point, so it's not like he was, having a bad game. But for him to turn that around with 3 fouls and to come out in that third and fourth quarter and get everyone behind him, the crowd behind him, and it was just, it was magical to watch.
We actually likened it at halftime. I mentioned to one of the gentlemen next to me that where it looks like he was getting a bit fired up, but Shane Heal was also notorious. If you got him angry or got under his skin, he would play better. And I think Goulding channeled a little bit of that in the second half.
Yes. Yeah, he did. No, you're right. Shane Hill used to take that, whether it was from the opposition fans, whether it was the referees or whatever it was. Yeah, he'd create that sort of me against the world mentality. And I guess you're right. That's what CG did the other night. But yeah, for him to be able to, I guess, compose himself and to go back into the game. I don't think he started the second half either. I think he came off the bench in the second half. He did have those 3 fouls. And for him to put on that performance in a game like that, in a playoff game, was just sensational to see.
And then in game 2, he came out hot as well. And I was shaking my head and scratching it a little bit when I noticed Dill Windler going under a screen on a dribble handoff. I mean, as a scorer, when you're feeling it and someone goes under a screen, it must just feel like you're throwing a pebble in off the side of the boat. Yeah,
I noticed that one. That's a good pickup. But yeah, I did notice that one, and I just thought, you can't give him, any daylight whatsoever. I mean, he's on such a high level, far higher level than I ever achieved. But yeah, for what, for him to be able to get those shots off. I mean, we saw that earlier in the set. Well, we saw that during the year many times, but I think there was a New Zealand game that sticks in my mind that he basically won single-handedly.
And he did it Perth earlier in the year as well.
Yes, he did. Exactly. So he has a habit of doing it, and that's why, like you say, you want to never give him any daylight whatsoever. You want to just try and get the ball out of his hands, or make him put it on the floor.
Yep.
But yeah, you don't want to give him that 3 ball.
Well, I mean, you're a pretty tough-nosed defender as well. When you're guarding something like that, would you perhaps maybe, if he's coming to curl for screen, try and play the high side so he has to be running away from the ball and then almost fading, or how would you attack it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I was never known for any defensive prowess whatsoever. In fact, my teammates used to call me Anru because I didn't have any D. So, but it's nice of you to ask me that question anyway. But yeah, generally, when I played, I wouldn't be guarding the guys like Gaze or Goulding, players like that. But if I ever did, and sometimes I'd have to, chase around Copeland or, someone like that. And yeah, and it's just horrendous. But yeah, when you're playing those guys, you're looking for your teammates to either double and get the ball out of his hands, or, you've either got a lock on his outside hip and just try and make it difficult, and you want the screener to show make it a hard show, and you basically just want to get the ball out of his hands. Someone like Chris Goulding, anytime they're running a play for him outside the 3-point line, you're just going to do whatever you can to get it out of his hands. But United do a good job of playing off that. So,
Yeah.
and that's the value of a great shooter, and that's why, sometimes you could have an effect on a game, and Chris Goulding has that effect on a game purely because, of what he can do. So
dangerous.
you've really got to knuckle down and get a piece of him.
And then Matt Hurt yesterday for South East Melbourne, scoring in a little bit of a different fashion, more creating for himself, but still with some very impressive. That high release from behind the back of his head is very hard to guard.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Shane Heal earlier. He had a similar, well, not similar, but he did sort of pull it from behind the head. But the fact that Matt Hurt's 6'9" and pulls it from back, but yeah, no, I did, and I also noticed the first play of the game. The Phoenix had it in when they had their possession. They ran a play for him to get it sort of and operate at around the elbow. So that was good to see him hit his first shot, and then of course I think he had 19 points at the half. And it got going. And if he hadn't got going, I doubt whether they would have got that win.
Now, before we get to predictions for each series, you have played in your fair share of game threes yourself. What's the expectation, I guess, going into game three from a physicality standpoint, and also the pressure that you feel, whether being at home or on the road, if it's any different?
Yeah, it was a little different in the old days, as I call it. Because we used to play a best of three series, whether it was a semi-final or a grand final series. We'd generally play game one on a Saturday night, and that would be a standalone. And then you'd play the following Friday, and then you'd play the Sunday sort of lunchtime game, Sunday afternoon game. So for me, my memories of game threes are all pretty good because, we had a pretty fit team. Brian Gorgon as a coach early in his career. I think he still coaches his teams that way, but we were one of the fittest teams. Well, I think we were the fittest team in the league. So whenever it got to a game three, we generally felt like we had that advantage. The other team may have had more talent than us, which in the case of the Tigers, that was definitely the case when you think of Bradkey, Copeland, Gaze, Giddy, Dave Simmons, Sibley's, guys like that. But we had the depth. So my memory of game threes was always, if we could get it to a game three, we felt like it was going to be in our favour, and that was generally the case. And it even in 1996, game three, because we back in the old days, we used to only play best of three for the grand final series, not best of five as they do now. So game three was the deciding game, and we won that by 38 points against the Tigers in 1996.
15,000.
So that game was, that was a great memory. TB of mine, having a championship basically wrapped up at half time. By half time, we were up by about 30 points. So, you never count a victory at all, especially in a grand final series. But when you're up 30 points in the third quarter, and you've got a pretty good team and you're well conditioned. That was a fairly enjoyable 24 minutes.
Well, it's interesting that you say about those big leads, because we've seen South East Melbourne come back against Adelaide. We've just seen Perth come back from, I'd taken the dog for a walk at half time. I was doing some soul searching. The way they come back out and come back in the third and the fourth. But I guess on that point, I asked John really after game one about the chess match of a series. They were playing at pretty high pace. Now, normally you'd think on the road you try and make it a bit of a slobber knocker, but in game one it was still pretty high pace in the first quarter, and it was more interesting if the finesse of the team and then playing fast all season, if that might be a tactical play to become more of an advantage later in the series against perhaps some older players that Melbourne have. I mean, obviously Perth have got Bryce, but other than that, they probably do have young legs. So, and obviously with such a big travel difference that Perth are obviously more accustomed to, do you think that might come into the series in game three tomorrow night?
Yeah, it could. I mean, there's generally a couple of days between games, and it's a 40-minute game now. But you mentioned something pretty critical, and that for the Perth boys anyway, for the Perth team, and that's that travel for them to have to fly over for game one last Thursday, then fly home for the Saturday game, and then then they've got to fly back to Melbourne again for when do they play? The Tuesday. They play the Tuesday now.
Yep.
So there's only 2 days between games. So you're right, that could become a factor. But yeah, I think Perth are going to play that high octane, sort of high tempo, high scoring sort of game, and I think that that's served them well. And if there's a slide on United at times, is that they can get a bit clunky offensively.
Yep.
Of course, it helps when CG 43's dropping 10 threes and could get 41 points, which is what he did in game one. But yeah, you can't necessarily rely on that, for all 3 games. And as we saw, I think CG, had 15 points, I think, in game 2. So I think coming home, he'll probably feel a bit more, a bit more at home, at John Cain Arena. And I think after just dropping 41 the previous Thursday, I think he'll come out tomorrow night and be ready to light it up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And one player that I mentioned, I've kind of said all season, I feel he's the barometer for Melbourne United. And he did step up when Goulding went to the bench in the second quarter, was Ian Clark. Whereas in game 2, he probably didn't have that same impact. And to the contrary with Perth, maybe I should call out players on Twitter at the start of a game a little bit more often, because I was kind of, what does Windler do if he's not making threes and if he's running under screens? What's he bringing to the table? And then I think as soon as I hit enter on that in game 2, he went, what, and broke the game open. So it's interesting how those imports are such key aspects to the team, even though they might not be necessarily the featured player in picking up that slack.
Spot on. Yeah, no, spot on, mate. I was asked before the series who the X factors were, and you've just mentioned both of them. I see Clark for United, to me, is a huge X factor and could be the difference when winning a title or not. And I think Windler or Windler, what is it? Is it Windler or Windler?
I think he goes Windler. Yeah.
What do we go with? Windler.
Yeah, I think Lockie Reed said he was taken with the Windler or something.
Yeah,
like
that's right. Gone with the wind. Gone with the Windler.
Yeah.
That's right, gone with the Windler. So we'll go with Windler. But we should get his name right, considering he basically
saved the season.
I guess game 2 off his own bat. I think he had 27 points, and particularly in the second half. Maybe as soon as you pressed enter on your tweet, I think that's maybe.
But again, I think it's his defensive impact that's probably more important, because if he's playing good defense on Goulding, like Bryce chasing around Goulding just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know why you'd want to wear down your elite scorer. But so your prediction for that game, and then we'll jump to the Illawarra one.
I agree. Well, I'm purely going to go with United in game 3 of that semi-finals. Mm-hmm. It just seems to be going to the home court advantage, and being there last Thursday night, I can really see the X factor for United again. Ian Clark coming good, and of course, Perth have had a bit of trouble with Goulding over the journey. So I'm going to stick with my original pick, and that's United in 3. And
will you be going to the game?
No, I'm not going tomorrow night. I'll be watching religiously, obviously on the TV. Yep. And not to give up my pick for the next series, but I did. I guess it was more of a wishful thinking, a bit like the old days TV. But I did pick an all Melbourne grand final, so that could fly back in my face in a hurry.
Yeah.
But I think United are going to take care of business Tuesday night against Perth, and then I know it's going to be tough, and I think we're going to talk about it next. But the Phoenix and the Hawks series is a fascinating series as well.
Yeah, well, yes, the game on Sunday, yesterday, depends when you're listening to this, was obviously a very good one, and to see the crowd almost full for a South East Melbourne game at John Cain Arena was also very impressive. But what was an interesting contradiction was in game 1, Illawarra had that big run of 21 points. South East then held them in that late third, early fourth, which there's a website called Spatial Jam, which has a lot of advanced stats, not sponsored just yet, but they have a net rating where it shows over the course of a game each team's plus minus for every minute of action, and Illawarra and South East were the 2 best teams in the league in that late third, early fourth, and Illawarra actually keep continuing on towards the late in the fourth as well, whereas South East often died off a little bit. But what's interesting is South East Melbourne actually have the best. They're one of the only teams in the league that are actually positive for the last minute of a game. So it'd be interesting to see if it does come down to X's and O's in those last
Yeah.
couple of minutes. Yeah, a home team, whilst the Illawarra have been obviously the best team all season, it is a bit easier to tighten up at home when you feel that pressure, and playing on the road a little bit more carefree might come into the hands of South East.
Yeah, look, anything can happen, and I thought the Phoenix did pretty well in game one up there in Illawarra, and having D Walt, back and starting and playing well. I think he had double-digit assists in that game, and yeah, I think that was a little bit unexpected from the Hawks. I don't know if they knew, that Phoenix were going to get that much out, so whether they were fully prepared for that or not. But I expect them to be ready for game three when they've earned the right, the Illawarra Hawks, to have this advantage, being the best team or finishing top of the ladder. So yeah, but like you said, anything can happen in that game three, and you'd be pretty brave to tip against the Hawks. But look, I've got a good feeling against with the Phoenix in that one. I think there is a bit of pressure. Yeah, it is. Pressure's building for the Hawks, and I think now that Hurt's got going in game two, and a few other guys for the Phoenix got going, and I think they know that they can beat the Hawks. They beat them 2 days earlier. Why can't they come up to Illawarra and beat them? Particularly seeing they
3 out of 4 times this season. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very gettable for them. But I think the Hawks fan are pretty happy to have that deciding game, and their home court, and of course they're going to have home court advantage if they make it through to the grand final series. So yeah, things are. But that's what makes it exciting in these deciding games. TB, I know the NBL are pumped to have both these semi-finals go, all the way to game three, and and the play-in, I think, worked really well. That was an exciting series. Adelaide were involved in that. They nearly pulled off an upset. So it's, I think, all in all, the NBL will be pretty happy with the way everything's rolling so far.
Interesting stat from the Illawarra series. Both games, the final score's been 101 to 94 to the home team.
Oh, there you go. How about that? The exact, yeah. Well, that wouldn't have happened, but I think was it Lee that hit a three? I think they were meant to lose by 10 yesterday or on the Sunday. But yeah, I think Lee hit a three-pointer on the buzzer that was sort of meaningless, but it moved it up to be. That's right, 101-94. So there you go. And what's the odds of it happening again? Lightning striking third time.
Interesting, because not to go into gambling on it too much, but the bookies are usually pretty close. And as Al Michaels used to say at the end of a blowout in the NFL, that shot did mean something to someone, because the total for that game was either 194.5 or 195.5. So I know that we won't go into that, but sometimes
we can go into it. I mean,
they make basketball interesting when you think it's over.
Yeah, no. Well, there are some meaningless shots that I guess are fairly meaningful to people that may have punted on certain things. So it's
well, even with every moment matters in the percentage. I know it doesn't count in the finals, but it counts in the regular season now.
Yeah, well, that's why I was actually thinking, why is he taking that shot? Why is he shooting it? But then again, the players in the NBL are tuned in the regular season, as you say, to play it right out to the buzzer. And, we've had those teams like United missed out by a bucket one year. And, it might be the difference. A bucket might be the difference between having home court in a series or not. And, so I guess the players are tuned in to play it right out to the end. But yeah, that one, I guess, was significant for some.
And one of the players I've been most impressed with, and I was surprised they didn't go to him earlier in the fourth, actually, is Will Hickey this season. I think he's been a great spark off the bench, and the lineup with him and Lee, obviously the depth of their roster is a strength, and their bench is, well, they probably are deeper than most other teams, which is why they are so successful against other lesser benches. But I think that at the end of this, when the season's on the line, you shorten your rotation. Illawarra yesterday had every player play double-figure minutes. I don't think in an elimination game you can get away with that, and I feel that Tatum, whilst you'll find what works, I feel that it's going to be 7 or 8 guys, and in the last 15 minutes, you just need to know which 6 guys you're going to go down with, right?
Yeah, but you're right about Will Hickey. He was unstoppable. He looked like he was unstoppable. Just the moves he was making to the basket.
Yeah.
In game 2 against the Phoenix, and I thought Tatum got great minutes from him. He's shown an ability to put faith a lot in his bench players. Grider or Grider, depending who you listen to. He came in and played some valuable minutes at the defensive end as well. Hickey at the offensive end, to me, looked like he was just about unstoppable. Days came out and was looking, I think he came off the bench. I think, starting Peatley and bringing him off the bench does give them a different look. So yeah, no, it'll be interesting. Things may tighten up in game 3 in Illawarra, but yeah, Tatum's got a lot of players there that, have earned their spot and have earned their minutes and have shown that they can play in big time games.
Yeah. Well, it might be a night where basketball fans need the multiple screens running because the WNBL Grand Final Game 1 is also one with the Bendigo Spirit. Now, they're playing Townsville. They had a clash with Game 2. I know that things will probably align now with this new ownership, but their Melbourne United Game 1 against Perth on Thursday started at 7 or 7:30. The WNBL game started at 6:30, so you had that crossover. And then obviously the WNBL hoping that there was going to be a sweep in that series, so there was no clash. So it's unfortunate that's happening. And of course, my under-18 Beavers Div 1 is also playing it at 8:30. I don't know if their game's live streaming or not on a Wednesday, but big night for basketball anyway. But
big night for you. You got 3 things to take care of. But no, you're right, because look, I'm a big fan of the WNBA. I've been following it. I think Bendigo Bendigo have been amazing all year, but Townsville have, they're firing at the right time. And yeah, it is a shame that at this time of the year that you get these big games in the WNBL and NBL and there's a clash. So yeah, it'd be nice that the powers that be could sort of work it out there, because I think it's the WNBL should be showcased just as much as the NBL. And as a basketball fan, I watch it all. So I'll be flicking channels. On that Wednesday night, I'll be flicking channels between the Hawks game and the game 1 of the women's grand final series.
Yeah, and we look forward to hopefully in the future more double headers in the women and the men like they do in the NBL 1. But that's probably another conversation for another time. Another interesting thing on the schedule, though, before we move on, is I thought it was interesting. I know obviously it's to do with the availability of the venues, I'm assuming, but how Illawarra are actually the number 1 seed, yet their game 3 is Wednesday. The other teams 2 and 3 play Tuesday. So if Illawarra do advance, they're actually going to have a rest disadvantage despite being the number 1 seed, which I thought was interesting.
They're going to have 1 day less. And yeah, in a perfect world, TB, you're right. The advantage should go to the team that finished on top. And yes, you would have thought their series, should have started first. And yeah, they should finish and have that extra day's rest. But I'm sure that there's an excuse, a reason. I shouldn't say an excuse. I think there'd be a valid reason for that, because but yeah, you're right. I think that's definitely something that but you could argue that the top team, the home court advantage, they should have taken care of it in 2 and they should have been resting already.
Absolutely.
But no, you're right. But I think on the surface of things, you're right. I think that the Hawks could feel a little bit peeved, going into a grand final series with 1 day's less rest, and yet they were on top of the ladder.
And now any extra thoughts on that, or observations on either of those before we move on?
No, not really. Just I'm going to stick with my pick after just talking up the Hawks and what a great team they've been all season. I do think that the Phoenix can sort of disrupt it, and with the United winning the night before, I'm going to get my all Melbourne grand final series. So, and now I'm totally biased, and I'm totally okay with that.
Excellent. Thanks for tuning in to part 1 of our special interview with Parky. That was our semi-final preview for the games coming up over the next couple of days. And stay tuned for after Game 3 and before Game 1 of the Grand Final Series, as we'll have this full interview with Andrew PARKY Parkinson. And please subscribe and stay tuned for later in the week. Part 2 will be out as well. This is one I've been waiting to do for a long time, as Parky shares some stories of his battle with cancer, the love and support of the basketball community through these tough times, his friendship with Corey Homicide Williams, his career with the Magic, and what it was like as a 21-year-old to go to a university that at the time was voted by Playboy as a top 4 party school in the States. Of course, we finish it up talking a little bit of Bendigo basketball and what it was like to finish his career playing with Ricky Daniels and Steve DeLaviaga at the Braves. This is one I've been waiting for a long time. Hope you all enjoy it. And again, please like and subscribe this pod so you catch part 2 of our interview later this week. And don't miss out on any of our exclusive basketball analysis. We love Talkin Ball. We love the techno. Thanks for listening. And thanks again to Boris for D Machine off Disket 2 as our podcast anthem. Peace, love, and hoops. Oh, catch you later in the week.